Washington's future had its best day yet on Thursday.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's the site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, we got so much we need to get to from Thursday's practice that we just got back from as we're recording this episode. We're going to talk about a few of the big name local guys we saw getting a lot of run on Thursday. That's Rahshawn Clark. That's Caleb Presley. We'll get there because the offense is really finding its stride, as we've talked about, where the defense has dominated early. And a lot of that today, Lars, as we're recording this again on Thursday, was thanks to a trio of true freshmen. That's wide receiver Audric Harris, that's quarterback Demond Williams Jr., and that's running back Adam Mohammed. Where do you want to start there?
Let's start with the one that, if not for the last, 20 minutes of practice, would have probably had the immaculate reception, or the immaculate.
No, you're absolutely right. I just want to stop you for 1 second there because these guys all had really great days. Two of them in Audric and Demond almost had perfect days. If Audric, I know you're going to get there, but with Demond, he threw a couple of picks on the last scripted series. But yeah, no, please, I'm sorry, continue.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, because like with that, if it not been for that last 25 minutes, I mean, it's really that one drop that Audric had going towards the end zone, which would have been, a 40, 50-yarder. It seemed like it just hung in the air for a while there. But basically, it was everything that, okay, you know what? I remember looking to you and saying, well, yeah, he's a freshman. And that's no slight to Audric Harris, who has looked, and it's not just today. I think that's why we want to kind of hit on this, especially because it's been incrementally coming. We've seen Audric get better and better. He looked pretty good in the spring. And really over the last, I want to say 5 or 6 practices, he seems to have taken that next step up.
Yes.
A little bit came in that when Rashid was out. And so that helped his cause just get extra snaps. But he really has seemed to come in and take those snaps and not just be a guy. And I say that respectfully in terms of he's, when you talk about playing freshmen, especially at the receiver position, you might expect a couple of those guys to maybe be in the mix for 4 games, but you're really more or less thinking 25 and down the road for most of that class. But Audric is a guy who's like, look, I have the ability to play right now. I understand the guys ahead of me, kind of a Denzel Boston of sort, the past couple of years, where I understand the guys ahead of me are going to get more reps, but I'm going to give you pretty much every reason to keep me and put me in some of these situations. And I just want to say all that to say we don't fault him for the one drop because the one drop doesn't negate the entire great practice that he had.
Absolutely.
But it's also kind of it's that small little reminder of, oh yeah, no, he is still a freshman. But I do want to kind of point out this caveat of, as I say all this, Jeremiah Hunter did have a couple of drops today too that were uncharacteristic. So it's not to say that, again, receivers are going to drop some passes every now and then. You just hope it's not a ton. And we haven't seen a ton in fall camp. But it's just a case of, okay, Audric's there. But again, this is why maybe he's not consistently there, because you still have the veterans above him. And again, if you can catch that touchdown, I think Kevin Cummings like, okay, yeah, now we'll get some first team reps. Maybe we'll get some more consistent first team reps.
Sure.
Got to catch that. And I know it sounds vindictive, and I'm not saying the coaching staff is doing that per se, but it's just that there's little small details, and you always hear it with the one main buzzword of coaching: details. That's a detail play that what did I say at practice? That's Alfonso Tuputala dropping the pick 6 at the 2-yard line last year, where you do everything right. You beat him deep. You beat double coverage deep, mind you. Audric did on that play.
He split 2 defenders.
Yep. And you do everything right except secure the bag and the touchdown. That's the one thing you need to do on that play.
So you make a lot of really great points there. And it just made me think of a Kevin Cummings quote from when we talked to him the other day, where we asked him about Audric Harris and, some of the strong practices he had strung together. And he word for word said, yeah, Audric has had some really great plays and he's had a few kind of awful plays. And again, quoting him there, where that was kind of reminiscent of it, where Audric had a fantastic day. There was just that one little moment where it's, oh yeah, no, and we're not going to harp on it because he had so many great plays throughout the practice that made him look really, really good. And you could say the exact same thing about Demond Williams. As I crack up in my little notebook here, he had a whole bunch of really nice plays, in the 11 period. I got one touchdown here. He had a 40-yard touchdown to Audric Harris. He had a 27-yard touchdown to Rashid Williams. He had a 48-yard pass to Luke Lucchini at one point. That was a really nice throw also. And just the more that I look through it, it's, yeah, we get that last scripted series where he got picked off by Darren Barkins and he got picked off by Dyson McCutcheon off a Caleb Presley tip, where, those ones you say, okay, certainly wasn't a perfect day, and there's still growing pains from a true freshman. But like we just said with Audric Harris, it's the exact same thing. It's those things are going to happen, and that's okay. But you want them to continue to grow and continue to learn. And the reason we wanted to, make sure we led with this and discuss this at length was because we wanted to say, yeah, the future certainly looks bright on Montlake, and those two guys are a big reason why. And with Demond, we saw him have his best day yet. Like, even when you take the picks into consideration, it was certainly his best day. He looked accurate. He showed poise in the pocket. He showed really great, eyes and mobility when he needed to escape the pocket, which is also wonderful to see. And it's something we saw from him in the spring, but it certainly has continued to develop, which is really nice. And it's just exactly what you want to see going forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the pocket presence, because that's one thing I was watching where we'll peel back the curtain slightly a little bit. The East end zone or the East practice field is it's like basically the entire sideline of a college football stadium, if you would imagine it. So sometimes you want to be sitting down the other side, and one time you want to sit on towards the end. And where, from my vantage point, his command of the pocket is why he's going to be so special down the road. Because yes, he has the arm strength, he has the touch. And I want to point out one thing about Demond is really imperative, given that, when you talk about young quarterbacks, where do they make the most mistakes? It's either holding onto the ball too long, or you just can't read defenses and you kind of get exposed that way. Demond is neither one. He misses long. He misses 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 yards long. And I think part of that is also just getting the relationships down. But if you're gonna miss long and out of bounds or long and through the end zone. And that's why the reason why I say that is the 2 picks that were happening. I know we kind of disagree on the Barkins one based on my vantage point. That's why I wanted to say that, to give credence to the vantage point, where, it might not have been the greatest read, but Barkins did make a heck of he did have to actually extend the body. The body wasn't just, oh wow, Demond threw it right to him. Because we've seen some picks like that from Demond where, okay, that's a gift wrap, and again, you still tip the cap to Barkins, but that's also why all this, and we're going to segue here real quick because I know we got to get going, is talking about Adam Mohammed and all of this. Because when you talk about the future of the program, and you talk about Rashid being a redshirt freshman, Audric, Jason Robinson being a true freshman, all those guys in that room, no matter how good Will Rogers ends up being, Jonah Coleman is going to prove why Adam Mohammed is going to be so important for Demond Williams. Because in this offense, no doubt, the quarterback is get the ball out, get the ball to your receivers in space, make things happen quick, so that way you're not going through a 3, 4, 5 second per second, read in the pocket. You're just getting the ball out and figuring it out. Adam Mohammed, my word. I know, again, probably should caveat this by saying tackling not at 100% in terms of, because you're in practice, it's camp, all that, preventing injuries. But I think even with full tackling, he's breaking. Yeah. Oh, I was gonna I say that to say even full tackling, I think he's breaking some of those tackles.
Oh yeah, no, my personal favorite, as I remember saying to you, was because he had 2 big runs that I have here written down, where the first one 45 yards. I think we settled on 45 when debating with our good buddy Christian Capel. And then he also had a 10-yard touchdown there. But on the 45-yard run, he shook 3 or 4 different guys. And my personal favorite was Vincent Holmes kind of jumped on his back at one point, and Adam just did a little shoulder and just threw him to the ground. And just watching that dude play, it's wow. Just watching him as a true freshman is incredible. Really, I don't want to sound like I'm overhyping him, but he's so mature in terms of his understanding the position, and just so advanced in terms of everything he's doing, which is really, really exciting. And Lars, I know we got so much more to say, because we're gonna dive into the offense a little bit more, because it really seems to be hitting its stride. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And, I hate hate to say it, but after seeing what the Mariners did against the Tigers over the past couple of days, I've got a FanDuel wager for all our everydayers that are, wherever they're checking on the FanDuel app. Paul Skeens, double-digit strikeouts against the Mariners on Friday. Seems like it's all too likely. I'd go check out those odds over on FanDuel. So, Lars, I know you have more you wanted to say about Adam Mohammed and this whole offense, because it really seems to be hitting its stride as a whole, which is a really nice thing to see for, after the defense dominated for so long.
Why is that? Because the offensive line is fully healthy and there's so many bodies to choose from. And the reason why I was saying that, and it was a perfect segue into this segment, because we can expand on the offense, because we're expanding on a few things here. The offensive line unit that opened up that hole, and I told you in practice, was Landen Hatchett and Zach Henning, two guys who are going to be a very key part of your future. And so when we're talking about the offense having success, obviously, you want Will Rogers to cook because he's likely your guy in 2024. I say likely only because Jedd Fisch hasn't publicly come out and said, yes, Will Rogers is our week 1 starter, et cetera. I guess there hasn't been any indication public as to reasons why that would be the case, but just to, I guess, be fair to Jedd, he hasn't named a quarterback yet for all intents and purposes. But when you talk about what this offense can be, and the reason why this fall camp is so important year 1 for some of these younger guys who might not play as much, is because when we're talking about 25, and I know we're not talking about 25, but when we think about 25, that's why these guys are going to be so far ahead in that system. And so everything that Jedd built at Arizona is now ramped up at Washington. You're not going to have a 1-10 season and a 5-7 season.
Right.
You're probably thinking that combines into a 6, 7, 8 win first season, depending on which road games you hit. Again, it could be 6-6 if you lose to Rutgers, or if you beat Rutgers. Now you're 7-5. There's these small little games that are going to actually matter in the grand scheme of things, and Washington fans are going to learn about that in the Big Ten. But this is why, like those pairings, and when we talked about the offensive line having a bunch of shifting players around on multiple players, multiple sides, everybody getting a chance everywhere, that's what's so important, is to not just see the new pairings, but like if I told you without describing the play, Landen Hatchett and Zach Henning opened up a lane, you're believing that. It's just believable. Like we've seen it multiple times. And now, to be fair, I caveat that with Landen still working his way back, obviously not at full, closer to full strength, but still not
more and more reps every day, which is a really good sign.
Exactly.
So going off of that, yes, absolutely, you make some really great points, and especially when you talk about Landen on the first team, like he's doing more and more, which is really great to see. You love that. But I wanted to go a different route with this, because there were 2 plays in particular that certainly deserve to be highlighted, where we saw multiple one-handed touchdown grabs today. The first one was a 23-yarder from Will Rogers to Jeremiah Hunter, where he went over Elijah Jackson and made a fantastic play that got the whole sideline all kinds of hyped up for it. And that one was incredible. And then just a couple plays later, Rogers again to Quentin Moore for a 19-yard one-handed touchdown, where Quentin had to go up and kind of contort his body around Kamori House, who got a really big shout out from John Richardson today, and got one from Robert Ballard the other day as well. But had to go up and around him and just pulled it in and used his body really well. And one of the reasons that we really like what the tight ends are going to do in this offense, because Quentin has shown major growth as a pass catcher. And at the same point, seeing that the tight ends are going to be so heavily utilized in this offense, whether it be Quentin, whether it be Kolecki Latu, whether it be Decker DeGraff at this point, where those 3 guys all seem like they're going to have some kind of role in this offense.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's slightly different types of receivers in tight ends. When you talk about Decker, way more so a receiver blocking, as a freshman still coming along. Quentin, known as a blocker because he's had to be that third tight end. But I think almost in a similar way, it's like Denzel sitting behind all those guys the last couple of years, sitting behind Jack and Devin last year for Quentin. Now, again, he was a JUCO guy, so he was already coming in with experience. But I think he kind of has fully had an appreciation for being an all-around tight end, not just being a blocker, not just being a pass catcher, and kind of being able to line up anywhere where he can split out, he can be that 6th guy, and really anywhere on the field, but especially the red zone. And that's what I remember mentioning a couple of weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, when we were making our bold predictions, and I said, Quentin Moore, like that's a dude, like somebody in this tight end room they're all going off. I think Kolecki and Moore will both go off. Which one ends up going off more, no pun intended, could just be whoever lines up where. In the sense of Kolecki, if they both stay healthy, it's a good problem to have. And no doubt Decker's still going to find a role in that offense. But I just think they're all just slightly different, where Kalecki seems like you could bet on him to be the receiver. But either way, you just have to love that's why getting Kalecki was so important, because if you roll into this with Quentin, Decker, and Charlie Kroll, it's not no disrespect to that trio, but that just rings a lot differently than without Kalecki.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's the biggest thing about it, is getting that extra guy. One guy you didn't mention there is Ryan Otten. Unfortunately, we haven't seen him in a while. Looks like he's still working his way back from an injury, so that's one where you really want that extra depth. And if Ryan were healthy, this is certainly a different conversation. But when you look at just where the room is right now, that's exactly what you want to see. You want to make sure that depth, especially as a pass catcher, is there, where we've seen so many times where these guys are just the security blankets. They're there on short routes. Just wherever you look, it's, oh yeah, Will's just, dumping it out in the flat for Kalecki or for one of the running backs. That's become a really big part of this offense, which, say what you will about the offensive line, it looks like that was going to be the case anyway, where that was something they did at Arizona, where they just want to get the ball to their playmakers in space. And it's one of the reasons that Jonah was so effective, was because he was really good on just some of those short passes where he's just taking the ball in space and, gaining, as I've said before, 7.5 yards per touch at Arizona, where that's crucial. That's something that's really important. And the tight ends are going to be a factor in that as well. But I feel like we need to, I know we talked about them a lot so far this week, but we need to make sure that a lot of this conversation revolves around the receivers, because I feel like every single day we're seeing a big play from a different guy. And I mean that, obviously with the whole room, but with the first team specifically, where Denzel has had some really nice plays this week. Giles has been really consistent. And then Jeremiah has been really consistent as well. And then every once in a while, he does exactly what, we saw him do when he was still at Cal against Thaddeus Dixon, where it goes up and makes just an incredible catch, where having just that combination of guys, those three guys, is going to be just so important for this offense.
Absolutely, 100% all right. I'm glad you mentioned the whole kind of Arizona tie-in with Jonah Coleman, because one guy I think we need to talk more about, and again, today was another example of it. Have you seen Kevin Green drop more than one pass?
No.
In a row? Like, remember what I said? When again, I know it was a very small sample size at Arizona. I understand that. But again, much like Denzel's sample size is smaller Washington because of Jalen Polk, Jalen Millen, Roma Dunze. Like, there's other, and even Giles Jackson to some degree, because Giles would have been probably ahead of Denzel on certain routes last season, being ahead of him in terms of seniority and things like that. Kevin Green is a guy to me where, again, behind Giles, he's competed with Keith Reynolds. I know Keith also had a decent day today, but I think of the two, Kevin Green Jr. is a little, just slightly ahead in that realm, because when you see those guys come out and you look at the offense on Damon, my God, consistency blanket has been Kevin Green. I think those two are going to,
yeah.
And that's the other thing when you think about 25 and kind of just the long-term projectability. But I think Kevin Green's going to have a role for this team this season, but I could easily see him after next season with Damon just exploding, almost in a way like kind of how Rome did, where he had a couple 100 yards, 300, 400 yards, so-and-so, and then boom, now 8,000-9,000, we're talking that big jump to 22, 21, even though he was a full-time starter-ish in 21, there was other extenuating circumstances as to why that wasn't the case. Different circumstances here.
John Donovan. Oh, sorry.
You say bless me over there. But that's your line. I got to give you credit for that, but I just love it so much. It was great to use it against you. But I say all that to say, I think the other thing when you talk about adding Jeremiah Hunter like a veteran in that sense, the addition of Kevin Green Jr., because we saw them look at Zachary Franklin, we look at a couple other receivers that they were potentially considering in the portal. There was the receiver that ended up at Florida, Elijah Badger, was another one that they were looking at. And I think Kevin Green almost, and I will say, Kevin Cummings, when I asked him about him at the preseason media day, he said he's one of the smartest guys he's ever coached. So to me, that lends credence to, okay, well, you obviously are not going to put him ahead of Giles because nobody deserves this season more than Giles, aside from Jeremiah Hunter and Denzel. So that's your starters. But I think Kevin is going to have a hard time staying off the field, especially when you start to get into the beat of the season.
Yeah, I love everything you said there, but it just kind of made me think, where I remember when Kevin, when he announced his commitment, there were a lot of fans that were really curious about the take, where they're like, oh, well, he doesn't have a huge sample size at Arizona. He was sitting behind these guys, and, the Elijah Badger was in the mix. Zachary Franklin was in the mix. And now that we've watched Kevin, we've had a chance to really dive in and see a lot more of him. the take is, it really makes sense where Elijah Badger and Zachary Franklin are certainly both very, very talented players. But not only do both of them only have 1 year of eligibility remaining, and neither of them, played in Jedd Fisch's offense in Arizona, but you just see that, okay, yeah, that's kind of what this is. It's another guy to help build Damon Williams and build for the future, which is really exciting. And yeah, there's certainly a chance he's going to make an impact this season, but it's more about that long-term buildup, which I feel is, become one of the themes of the show when we think about all these guys, which is really interesting. And then real quickly along the offensive line, we're still continuing to see just so much shuffling there where, I know all the fans should go check it out at the mock game on Saturday, where it's going to be fully open. There's going to be an ample opportunity for them to do that. But just the more that I look at it, seeing Landen get more first team reps is really interesting. You love to see that. And we're starting to see Maximus McCree get more reps at left tackle, which Lars plays into your agenda. But both of those things are just really good for the state of the offense going forward. And I feel like we're starting to see the offensive line get stronger and start to, where I think the defense is simplified a little bit. And we haven't seen nearly as many of the, the twists and some of the exotic pass rush schemes we're going to see this fall as they start to prepare for their week 1 opponent. But I think that we're starting to see what this offensive line can really do. And again, certainly not going to be elite, but they're coming along and it's starting to look really good. And Lars, with that being said, we saw some local guys get some good run on Thursday, which we'll get to right after a message from our good friends over at GameTime, because GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets the first pitch, which is awesome for me. I'm planning on hitting up a couple more Mariners games before the end of the season. There's some opponents coming into town that I really want to see, and I just love going to baseball games, and there's no better way to do that than by buying tickets on the GameTime app, because they got last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. They got flash deals. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, which I love. I love sitting all over the ballpark, getting the feel from a whole bunch of different places. And you can take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So Lars, I don't know about you, but I know, when I post some stuff over on Huskies Wire, one pair of guys that fans are always really interested in learning about, or it's always local guys in general, but two in particular that I hear a lot about are Caleb Presley and Rahshawn Clark. And it felt like they both got their most run of the fall on Thursday.
I mean, Caleb played the biggest role by creating that tip for Dyson. I mean, again, that's no slight.
A real nice play too.
But that's what I'm saying in terms of, like, it's not a slight to, it's just because when you're not able to be healthy and practicing, it's just doing what you can. But I think it's important to touch on these guys because when we talked about it, I remember we had this discussion over the summer, oh man, how are you going to sort through all this? There's so many guys in the secondary. I think we're starting to figure that out, where you got about 5 or 6 guys in the secondary that you can work with and rotate. Leroy, I mean, I know Leroy's kind of iffy right now, but just there's an Elijah at that. You got enough rotation back there and depth. If Curly is in there somewhere, you can figure it out. But still having those guys to build towards the future. I know, and Rahshawn Clark's now listed officially as a safety on the Washington depth chart, was previously a defensive back / athlete. And I just think, I think it was either Vinny or somebody was asked about him. And basically they said along the lines of, well, just the way the depth is shaking out. And I think first thing you can see is the overall talent being there. It's just a matter of, can you build into that over the course of, let's say by the end of October, if injuries are mounting up and those guys have been able to practice for 2 months, they might actually get a chance to play, where we saw that in 22, where, hey, if you have enough injuries in the secondary, all hands are on deck. And I know that was the Chuck Morrell line, but this still applies to Steve Belichick, where you're going to look in that room and say, okay, who can go make a play?
Yeah.
It has to start in practice. And so the fact that they've been doing that, and I think part of it, you can tell some drills are more getting these guys' confidence back into it, because there is a confidence side of this as well. Not just the, okay, mentally, am I healthy? Am I good to go? But it's also being confident with it so you're not thinking. And that's where the plays like Caleb's tip start to come into form, where honestly, I think he could have had a pick, if I'm being honest. He probably should have had a pick on the play. Ends up getting the pick for a team, but probably should have had it for himself.
No, I agree. Where it certainly looked like he had an opportunity there, but he still made the play, which is exactly what you want to see. Where we talked to John Richardson today, and one of the things that we asked him about were the boxing gloves. We've seen a lot of the guys, with that little bit of the extra reach, be able to make a little PBU when they've got their boxing gloves on, which I respect. I think it's a lot of fun. But when I watched both those guys, it really stood out to me that where Caleb, we saw him, not necessarily healthy last fall and even missed portions of the spring while still rehabbing from an injury. And seeing him healthy is really, really good to see. But you could say the same about Rahshawn Clark, where when I watch Rahshawn Clark, he doesn't look just like a safety, where they've had him come down. They're having him play outside corner, where if his future is at safety, that's fine. That's great. But they're having him move all over the formation. They're having him try out all these different things, which is exactly why you want to take a guy like that, where you take him and you just say, all right, we're going to figure it out when you get here, which seems to be exactly what they're doing, where, if in a year they say, no, we like you better at corner full time. Great, fine. You can make it work. I trust the staff to make that happen. But just watching them just experiment with both those guys, try them in different spots, try whatever it takes to help them out is not just great for, the long term when, because obviously all the everydayers, all the Husky fans out there love in-state recruiting and things like that. But when you just think about what it means for some of those guys to make a big time impact at their hometown program, it's always really cool to see.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad, what, one guy that we should talk about, Sam Adams. I mean, we talk about, a guy, I think I was talking to Alyssa Charleston with Fox 13 about this, where he came in 2020 as the second running back take behind JV on Sunday. Just let that sink in for a hot second there. Like, this guy, Sam's been a guy where if he could stay healthy, we've seen him have a potential. We saw him in brief moments last season, get a couple of touches in the season for the first time in his career. And now we've seen him get a lot of run in fall camp. And I kind of looked at you today and I'm like, where does he actually end up stacking up on the depth chart? Because he's honestly made some nice runs and and you're getting working with the first team and second team and things like that. But either way, he's still at the end of the day is kind of a guy where, a good soldier of the program and able to stay around. And if he can stay healthy, I'm really kind of curious what role he could carve out, because he's looked pretty decent in camp. And it's almost like, okay, cool. This is the payoff of that 4-star recruit that you signed in 2020, that's what everybody thought they were getting. I know he also can play safety at Eastside Catholic and things like that, but he's fully committed to running back. There's zero chance he's changing positions now. And when you just look at the way he runs, the bounce that he seemed to have, hasn't really missed. I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, he hasn't been limited compared to what he's been to be.
And that's what I wanted to say is it's nice to see him fully healthy. Where that's something it always felt like was the biggest hurdle for him, was making sure he could stay healthy, where, obviously coming out of Eastside Catholic, he had the shoulder thing and it seemed to limit him. And there always just seemed to be little things that were barking at him and nagging at him that always just felt like they prevented him from being 100%, where it seems like this offense might be able to just play the best role for him, where he can just really just activate his full self, where I don't think you or I expect him to be a major part of the rotation, but with the amount of run he's been getting in fall camp, it's certainly something that you can't just, brush it to the side. We're watching him. We know that the staff likes him as a pass catcher. He's shown real prowess with his vision and with some of the things on the ground. So it's okay. Yeah. Behind Jonah and behind Cam, it's Adam Mohammed's in there, Daniel Ngata's in there, Jordan Washington's in there, but Sam has certainly found a way to put himself in that conversation.
Yeah, and it's, again, availability. If you can be available, and when you think about the way Scotty Graham has talked about the running backs, and I would talk to him today at practice, but when we think about, how because, again, I think they've been on record as saying, look, Jonah's not going to get 20, 25 touches a game. He could, right, as an old man. I'm sure he probably could handle that, but no way do you want to put that guy in a position to where he's got to take the abuse when you have, as you mentioned, Cam Davis, Sam Adams, Adam Mohammed. You just go down the list of guys, whether who's healthy or fully healthy or not. I think that's why, like, if Sam's showing that he can be healthy, and, when we're not talking about certain guys, or when, I guess to answer some fans' questions here in a roundabout way, like you mentioned the way that I did with Ryan out, where I didn't mention it because I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say it's not there. I'm just going to say, here's what we're seeing. Right. You make of that what you will, right, and we'll go from there.
No, absolutely. And that's the best thing to do with this, where, it feels like Jonah at max is going to get 20 touches a game, like max, where, you can argue that if you will, in terms of, is that the best idea for this offense? You can have that debate all day long. But with the amount of buys that have shown that they can make an impact in this room, that's good news. And that's exactly what you want to see. And Lars, on that note, we're going to get out of here. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. And thank you for making Locked On Huskies your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast, from NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors. Our good buddy Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. And you can find the link to the Locked On College Football podcast in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. With that being said, also, you're going to want to make sure that you go check out the Locked On Huskies Insider program, because today on Friday after practice, Lars and I are going to be recording the first exclusive Locked On Huskies Insiders only Q&A, and you get a free 2-week trial. So click on the link down in the description below. It's $4.99 a month. After that, you'll get access to more of these Q&As where we're going to just answer any and all questions our everydayers might have, our insiders might have, and from there on, we're also going to be posting the interviews that we have over there that we've gotten through fall camp, especially whenever Scotty Graham talks. That's one that you certainly want to make sure you don't miss a second of. That guy is just so much fun to talk to. We love him so much. On top of that, you get the opportunity to chat with us one-on-one, and we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that it is very, very well worth it. And with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.